I started counting by heartbeats because the clock on the dresser had stopped weeks ago and I hadn't bothered to replace the battery. It was something my late wife used to nag me about, small things as signs of bigger neglect. But since she passed, I'd learned that letting a few little things slide is how you keep living. That night, behind a door locked from the hallway, I listened to the thud and clink of glassware, the rising laughter, the chorus of voices drifting up the stairs. My son's colleagues, his clients, people with names he had chewed carefully in front of a mirror. He'd told me they were coming for a quiet dinner, and that I should rest in my room. Then he turned the thumb latch outside and pocketed the key like a teenager hiding a diary. I touched the knob, pulled, and felt the metal answer with a stubborn click. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. It was humiliating. I did what old men do when pride is bruised and the body can't break a door. Before we continue, be part of our growing family by hitting that subscribe button. And here's something fun. Share your name and tell us where you're tuning in from in the comments. We might feature you with a shout out in our next video, because your support truly means the world to us. Now, let's proceed. I sat. I breathed. I took stock. There was a glass of water on the nightstand and my reading glasses beside it, the dog-eared biography I'd been trying to finish, and the narrow bed I'd moved into when I sold my own house to help him buy this one. What my son never said out loud, what he probably told himself he'd outgrow, is that this was still my money holding up his roof. I didn't need to remind him. That always sounded like leverage, and I never wanted that between us. I had moved in to be near my granddaughter after her birth, to be the soft place in a house that ran on calendars and deadlines and parties where the best china came out, but the heart stayed locked away. He used to be softer. We both used to be. At some point I stood, pressed my ear to the door, and caught a sliver of conversation. His wife's bright voice, always a little too loud when she wanted to steer the evening, said, "Let's keep the hallway closed. It's cluttered. My hallway. My photographs. My life arranged on a narrow console table. Their baby's first shoes, my wedding picture, a Polaroid of my son with a gap-toothed grin holding a paper crown from his third-grade play. The idea that my presence, or even my relics, could embarrass him was like a splinter under the nail, small, sharp, impossible to ignore. I sat again and fished my phone from my pocket. There were 2 bars of signal. I texted my neighbor, Lewis. Locked in. Long story. I'm okay. Can you please be my witness in the morning? Lewis replied instantly with a thumbs up and a question mark. I answered, I'll explain tomorrow. I also scrolled to voice memos, pressed record, propped the phone near the base of the door, and left it running. I needed to remember how it sounded to be erased. The 12 hours lengthened like taffy, sticky and slow. I slept in gulps. Woke to footsteps. At midnight the laughter was loudest. At 2 it thinned to lingering goodnights. At 3 the printer on the kitchen counter chirped as the dishwasher started. At 4 there was the hollow quiet of a big house breathing. Somewhere near dawn, I dreamed of the night my son was born, when the nurse placed him on my chest and he rooted for a heartbeat the way a small ship leans toward a lighthouse. When I woke, the room was pale with morning. I had something now that I didn't have last night, time that had run its course into certainty. What he'd done wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. Choices have consequences. If I'd wanted a dramatic rescue, I could have banged and shouted. My neighbor would have come with the police. But I wanted something different, something cleaner. I wanted to change the shape of the story so it would never fit him to lock me away again. Just after 8, the lock turned. The door eased open a few inches and my son's face appeared in the space, sheepish, not sorry. Hey, Dad, you awake? He said, like he was checking if I wanted toast. He swung the door open the rest of the way and set the key on my dresser with a tiny clink that I felt in my teeth. It went late, he added. I didn't want noise to bother you. The sentence ended with cheap wallpaper, thin and easy to peel. I stood, slow because slow is what my knees do now, and I looked at him for a full count of 5. He shifted. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm going to make coffee, he said. You want some? I told him no, thank you. I brushed past him in the hallway. My photographs stared back at me, dignified as judges. I took each frame down, set them in a cardboard box, and carried the box to my room. He hovered. "What are you doing?" he asked. I said, "Tidying." I showered. I dressed in my Sunday jacket. I folded 3 shirts and 2 trousers. I packed the box of photographs. In the kitchen, he avoided the word sorry with a gymnast's flexibility. He told me the clients were important. He told me he'd had to curate the evening. He told me the hallway clutter made the home feel small. I listened like a man at his own funeral, listening to the eulogy, counting the small edits that make a life fit into a neat legend. I didn't argue. I didn't slam anything. I drank water, thanked him for offering coffee, and told him I had errands. "You good?" he asked. "Fine," I said. He nodded as if relieved. I picked up my jacket, my box of photographs, and my silence, and I left. My first stop was at the community credit union I'd used for 30 years. The manager knew me by name and wore the same sensible shoes she had in 2001. I sat with her in her glass-walled office, and, using the list I'd written overnight, I updated everything. I revoked the durable power of attorney I'd given my son after my wife died, an act of trust that had seemed practical at the time. I updated beneficiaries, changed passwords, and asked her to notarize a simple letter stating I had full control of my accounts and that no one should be permitted access without my written consent. The manager didn't ask why. She'd seen enough families to know that the story you tell the bank is never the whole story. I left with a folder of fresh copies and a feeling like stepping into a shirt that actually fits. Next, I stopped by the small law office above the bakery. The attorney there, Ms. Mendez, neat bun, quick eyes, had helped me set up a revocable trust when I sold my house and decided to move in with my son. The house we lived in wasn't technically his. I had paid the down payment and, on advice, we titled it in my trust with a plan that he'd inherit it later. Back then, I had thought of it as an elegant way to forever tether us. I give you stability, you give me daily family. MS. Mendez poured me coffee and listened as I described, in the same calm voice I'd used with the bank, exactly what had happened. "You could file a police report for false imprisonment," she said. "We can also address your housing situation." I told her I wanted to be decent, not vindictive. She nodded. "Decency and boundaries can coexist," she said. Then we got to work. By noon, I had signed an amendment to the trust, removing my son as successor trustee and beneficiary for the house. We prepared a notice terminating their license to occupy my property, formal, legal, not cruel, and arranged to have it served by a professional process server. 30 days. I left the office with papers neatly clipped and something in my chest that wasn't anger anymore. It was resolve. On my way home, I stopped at the police station, not to demand a pair of handcuffs, but to file an informational report. I handed the officer my ID and explained that I had been locked in my room for 12 hours by a household member, against my will, during a social event. I played a portion of the audio, the click of the lock, my son's voice telling someone to keep the hallway closed, my own voice at 1:13 a.m., recorded as I said, "For the sake of memory, I am not allowed to leave." The officer took notes. He gave me a case number. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. "Not at this time," I said, "but I want a record." He nodded, slid the paper across the counter to me, and said, "If you feel unsafe, call us right away." Outside, the sun had climbed high and mean, but it felt like shade had finally found me. I didn't go straight home. I called Louis and asked if I could sit on his porch for a while. He handed me a glass of iced tea and a listening face. I told him everything. He didn't blink at the pettiness of it. He understood that small humiliations can break bones you don't see on X-rays. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I told him about the bank, the lawyer, the notice. I told him I didn't want to blow up my son's life. I wanted to teach him that there's a cost to treating family like folding chairs, useful until company comes. Louis nodded. "You're a kinder man than I am," he said. "But you're right. Boundaries aren't revenge. They're lessons." We sat in friendly quiet for a while, and then I stood and went home. When I walked in, the dishwasher door was open, racks half pulled, wine glasses upside down like frozen bellflowers. My son looked up from the table where he was making a list. He had the face of a man building a raft from yesterday's wood. "Dad," he started, but stopped when he saw the envelope in my hand. The process server had beaten me home. The notice was already on the kitchen counter with his signature acknowledging receipt. I placed a separate envelope beside it with copies of the trust amendment and the police case number. "What is this?" he asked, color draining. I told him plainly, "It's the end of the old arrangement. I'm moving out. You and your family have 30 days to find a new place. The house will be sold or rented, my decision. I've updated my documents. I filed a report. This isn't punishment. It's clarity." He stared at the page like it was written in a language he'd studied in high school and forgotten. "Dad, this is extreme," he said. "Over a misunderstanding." I shook my head. "A lock is not a misunderstanding," I said. "It's a sentence." He paced, ran a hand through his hair, said all the things a person says when the past catches up. "You know, I didn't mean it like that. It was just one night. I was under pressure. I would have unlocked earlier. I just forgot the key in my pocket." Excuses are a type of weather. They pass through, they rarely nourish. I let him speak. When he finally sat down, eyes bright with a kind of frightened anger, I told him the rest. "I'm also hosting a dinner at the community hall next week," I said. "I've invited some of your guests. Louis will be there. Ms. Mendez will be there. I will be there. I will say nothing unkind about you. I will simply tell the truth about last night and about boundaries going forward. If they ask you about it at work, you'll have a chance to tell the truth too. Consider it an opportunity to be the kind of man you want your daughter to marry someday." He swallowed. He didn't answer. My granddaughter toddled into the kitchen just then, pajamas soft, hair wild, and raised her arms to me. I picked her up, kissed her forehead, and felt the entire point of my life again. Over the next days, I packed quietly. I found a small apartment a bus ride away. Nothing fancy, but it had a sun-warmed window that faced east and an oak table just big enough for 2 plates and a loaf of bread. I hired 2 movers. I labeled boxes with a thick marker. My son avoided me when he could and spluttered when he couldn't. My daughter-in-law did not speak to me at all. She became a breeze that only moved curtains. On the morning of the community hall event, I pressed my shirt, tied my tie, and walked there alone. The tables were set with white paper cloths and vases of supermarket flowers. People came who didn't need to, but did anyway. That's how you know who your people are. Louis took a row near the front. Ms. Mendez stood at the back with a clipboard, not to make a scene, but to be a witness. My son arrived late, looking thinner than he had a week ago. I spoke simply. I told them my name, my story, my decision. I did not show the audio. I did not dramatize. I used the word locked, like a carpenter uses a level, calmly, to ensure the line stays straight. I said I loved my son, and that love without boundaries curdles into resentment. I said the house would no longer be a place where I could be put away like seasonal decorations. I said the police had a report and the lawyer had my wishes. People listen the way people do when they sense a thing they'll need later, like instructions on a life raft. When I finished, my son stood. For a second, I thought he would leave. Then he cleared his throat and said, "I made a mistake." He said it again, like a swimmer remembering the stroke. "I made a mistake. I wanted to impress people who don't care about me. I hurt the person who does." He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He didn't even ask me to change my mind. He said, "I accept the consequences." The room exhaled. Consequences are the most honest teachers. Over the next weeks, he learned to look his landlord in the eye, to fill out rental applications, to wake up earlier to tour places before they were taken. I learned to sleep with quiet in the marrow again. My new apartment smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old books. I made it smell like onions and thyme. I hung the photographs in a line that told a story. Boy with paper crown, man with diploma, father with newborn, husband with wife, widower with granddaughter in his arm. I bought a new battery for the dresser clock. I volunteered to read at the library on Tuesdays. On Fridays, I met Louis for fried fish and too much salt. Sometimes, when I looked at my phone, There was a message from my son, a photo of his daughter holding a crayon, a question about a recipe, a memory that arrived like a stray cat at the back door. I answered when I wanted to, and I didn't when I didn't. That was new. One evening, near the end of their 30 days, there was a knock at my door. My son stood in the hallway with a manila envelope and a face I recognized from when he was 10 and had cracked our neighbor's window with a baseball. He held out the envelope like penance. Inside was a letter written by hand. He had dated it. He had not apologized in that irresponsible way that expects the word to reset everything. But he had apologized in the kind way that puts the heavy thing down and steps back. "I'm not asking you to undo what you've done," he wrote. "I'm asking you to let me try to be a better man inside the boundaries you set." I folded the letter along its creases and put it on my table. I told him he could come in if he wanted. He chose to stand. "I'll bring your granddaughter by on Sunday," he said. "We'll have breakfast." I nodded. He left. The hallway filled with quiet that felt like a hymn. Sunday came smelling of coffee and butter. My granddaughter sat on my lap and tapped the clock on the dresser with her fingertip. "Tick," she said, delighted. I laughed. My son washed dishes without being asked. There are no cinematic endings in real life. No full orchestras to swell as truth walks in from the cold. But there are small, right sounds. A key turning from the inside. A plate set gently in a rack. A child pronouncing the world as she hears it. I didn't sell the house right away. I rented it to a couple who needed a start and kept the deed where it belonged. I kept the police report in a folder with other papers that matter, not because I wanted to use it, but because the past is best kept labeled and shelved, not stuffed in closets where it can fall on your head. If you ask me whether I forgave him, I'd say forgiveness isn't a light switch you flip in a bright room. It's a dimmer you turn a notch every time a person shows you they've earned more light. He still catches himself sometimes, reaching for vanity like a glass he doesn't need. I still catch myself too, reaching for the old habit of rescuing him before he's asked. But there's a new habit in the house now, even if the house isn't ours together anymore. A habit of open doors, of asking instead of assuming, of keeping the keys where everyone can see them. And there's this, which I will keep until I can't keep anything. The knowledge that the night he locked me away, I chose not to make noise, but to make change. It left him speechless, yes. But more than that, it taught us both a language we should have learned years ago, the one where love and limits speak with the same mouth and are better understood for it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us.